Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. This is Gemini Brett. Here to speak about the Venus Cazimi that aligns in just a couple of hours' time. Today is June 3rd, 2020, Wednesday, Mercury's Day, Miércoles. So interesting that Venus is traveling through the heart of the sun. Venus is Cazimi in the sign of Gemini, and this begins a new cycle. So this is a map of slight adjustments to what I learned at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School from Daniel Germario and Kaylin Castell. Daniel, who really visioned forth a way to work with the sacred choreography of Moon, Venus, and Sun in these 19-month Venus Synodic cycles to really work on our releasing, our purging, our purification, reclaiming our powers. For why? For the sake of love, you know? So this is a very powerful system of timing that you can work with and apply to any of the great changes that you're making in your personal world or that you're assisting the world to make. This is an image from some days ago. This was May 23rd, 2020. You know, I just have to honor that I'm having a hard time speaking about the astronomy and especially Venus and about love when, you know, for me, there's a lot of confusion right now, pain, excitement, fear, joy. Yeah. I'm trying to allow the mind not to do the heart's feelings, to let the heart be the heart, you know? And to let the mind be the mind. And in some ways, I think this cycle that begins is speaking about this. I guess this would be a good image. This is an image of the Moon Venus conjunction on May 23rd. That's right, conjunctions are not all occultations, very rarely are. Planets have latitude as well as longitude. This is Moon and Venus and Mercury on May 23rd in the sign of Gemini, setting in the evening west. And it's a good image for Gemini, I think. I took a time lapse that day and there were planes and cars, certainly less so than there typically are. Double-edged sword, that one. Double edges, cars and planes and travel and things and thinks, Gemini. So for Moon to meet Venus for the last time as an evening star, in the sign of Gemini, occupying with Mercury, I think was a beautiful thing indeed. We're entering a cycle today that in many ways will be about the head and the heart. It's a good image also to see that the sky has chakras. You could say the earth has chakras. Maybe the sun has chakras because these are the beams of the sun. And the rays extended to show us sometimes these climbing colors of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet, you know, tuned to the same colors of this energetic system that's had many names throughout the many mystery traditions, but the chakras, the wheels, right? Something that I think many of us have heard about, many of us have begun to work with, and the Venus cycle can help us tune into those systems and realigning them. And it's not something that you do in a day. Venus is in the middle of her retrograde cycle today. She is retrograde at this time for 42 days, but there's a station day on either side. And sometimes it's actually more aligned to what we say with Venus is she appears to move backwards through the zodiac in 40 days and 40 nights. And of course, that period is alive in many scriptures in speaking about initiations and change. During Venus's time retrograde, she will transition from an evening star where we see her in this photograph to a morning star. from our point of view, and this is because Venus is passing Earth and therefore closest to Earth. Venus moves from the evening star side of the sky, setting after the sun, where I'm sure you've been enjoying her bright, amazing light for the last months and months. Now she's gone. Now she is between Earth and the sun today, literally, right? And this means we don't see Venus. She's under the beams. She's in the combust realms, but one of the ancient words for the exact alignment, some say within a degree on either side. Some say within 17 arc minutes. Regardless, it's now, it's happening. Venus cazimi in the heart of it, in the throne room, that this is like this super powering of the planetary energy. If you're familiar with the descent of Inanna, the great Sumerian story, it's said to be the oldest story known, the oldest story that we have written record of, at least. From Sumeria, from Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago. Inanna, queen of heaven and earth, who descends into the underworld, is killed, is reborn, and ascends again. On the way down, she removes 7 adornments. The me, interestingly, they're called, a word that really, I guess, defies translation, or perhaps does not. And she has to move, as all souls do when they travel into the underworld, the Kur, which is Inanna's sister Ereshkigal's domain. You have to move through the 7 gates, and the gatekeeper Neti will take something from you at each. Inanna resists, but she's told that the ways of the underworld are perfect. And at the first gate, or maybe we could say the 7th, the closest to Earth, she removes her crown. And then it said these lapis earrings. I like to say a bindi, and you'll see why. She removes a double-stranded lapis lazuli necklace, a golden breastplate called Come Man Come, a girdle of birthstones, a ring of power, a red robe. Importantly, the ring of power hangs near the orange zone, near the sacral chakra. Crown, right? So we're moving down through these energetic centers, and I'll show you the timings of that and some invitation of how we can personally work with this to stay aligned, to realign in these times of great change, and how this cycle will assist change. For that's what Gemini is about. And in many regards, it is about change necessitated by the truth that we need to learn to speak the language describing our needs in a tongue that can be heard by another's ears. So I think it's 10:47 a.m. Pacific here in a couple hours. It would be a wonderful time to sit with the sun and call to Venus, introduce yourself, invite her guidance, invite the guidance of this cycle. Perhaps turn your back there, let the sun and Venus shine through your heart, engage with your shadow. Tune into things that you are wishing to change, and invite the assistance of grace. So in this photo of the Moon-Venus conjunction, the last one is an evening star that we'll see for quite some time. I'll show you when the next one will be. Mercury and Venus were parallel, while Moon and Venus were conjoined. It was like a really amazing sacred astronomical thing. Also, Mercury and Venus were out of bounds, and I don't want to get into the astronomy of what that, well, actually I do. I'll say this night they both set into this tree. The furthest the sun can go is into this tree. It is very far north of the cardinal direction west. They or have been traveling in places the sun could only dream to go. And that out of bounds nature stimulates a rebellion, a shift, out of the box for the mind, Mercury, for the heart, Venus. Yeah, they are both much more than those things, but they are those things. And I loved seeing Mercury here in the blue, the throat chakra of communication, right? In Gemini too, let's speak truth without hesitation or reservation, or maybe through cultivating the magic and the spells of what to say, what not to say, and what not to say, but how to say it, depending on who we're saying it to. There are many ways to speak truth. And the way we speak truth to one will not always be as powerful for another, right? So part of this cycle, and it's now getting filtered and studied, filtered by the language of, educated in the university of the heart. How can I speak my truth in such a way that it is heard, right? Because it's effective, and this is a training we've been in, just raw authenticity. Let your heart speak. Let yourself feel. Do not be afraid of your power, of your magic. Come alive. We've been engaged in that study. And there's been much resisting this, of course. Our world is seemingly built to keep the heart mute, right? Now is a time, I think, where we are learning the spells, like literally how we spell our words, how we voice our words, not only without, but within, how we narrate, which creates our reality, you see? To honor the truth of that magic. So to do this in a way with the strength of the feelings intact, and certainly not continue serving the suppressed to control me, but rather now controlling the expressed to serve me. And part of that is the incredible beauty. And I like to think of it actually kind of as spy work, as infiltration work. If I go into this scene and I want to speak to these people about perhaps allowing themselves to see the world in a new way, if they are people who have resistance to astrology, should I go there and speak words like Mercury and Venus parallel in Gemini? Well, the moon conjoined from the sacral chakra? No. With you? Yeah. That's exactly how I want to speak. With me? Even, there's parts of me who are unwilling to hear wisdom that other parts are, or they need it rephrased. There's a young one in me who wants to be spoken to in a more sensitive way. There's one in me who seeks a wisdom of the future, who wants to hear it straight, and honoring that and testing those waters and asking for consent and finding our ways in, so that we're not just trying to shake people awake. And that's going to be a very important signature of this cycle, of the awakening truth of the heart, both in our experience and our expression of it. So we see in this photograph, Mercury in the blue of the throat, Venus in the green of the heart chakra, and Moon in the orange of the sacral chakra, the creative center, the gift of life. So the descent of Inanna is just an amazing story. And I will say that there is a bit at the very beginning of the story where it is said the Halupu tree, which she saves from the banks of the Euphrates, is moved from the west to the east. You see, this is Venus moving from the evening star position, where she is for about 9 months, available to our eyes, and now under the beams of the sun. No Venus for you, but she sees you, so go to the sun today and state your prayers. Wow, and there is a beautiful little yellow bird I've never seen. eating a loquat. I like this. Gemini in many ways will be the language of the birds. Okay, she will be reborn as a morning star and spend about 9 months there. What happens is she quickly, Venus, because retrograde apparently from Earth's experience, moving in the opposite direction as the sun, Venus will quickly distance herself from the sun. And the astronomical experience of this, and I invite you, I implore you to have this astronomical experience in the course of the next week, maybe beginning around June 10th, to wake up before the sun, to go to the east, north of east, to experience Venus's light shining, smiling back to you, seeing you, the goddess reborn, the heart reborn. And into an exploration, I can say, of lightness. She will quickly thereafter, when you catch her gaze, go away, because the 12th house is hidden things. Why? When the sun rises, it hides the sky. And even Venus, who shines so brightly, goes away. Now, I have seen Venus by day, and I can teach you to, and there will be times during this cycle where we will have more possibility to see Venus climbing the Rainbow Mountain, even during the day, if you know where to look. It's a powerful experience. I hope you have seen the moon by day. Yeah. If your eyes are open and your eyes are to the sky, this is something you have seen. But of course, for the most part, the sun brings light to the earth and it hides the sky. So if you see Venus rise next week, she will go away when the light climbs. And by the way, in this great story of Inanna, this is probably the monsters that Enki sends to chase her, to take back the me. Okay, so where does Inanna receive the me in this story? I'm not going to tell the story in full, as you can tell. I've got a client here pretty soon, actually. I just want to give a transmission about this cycle. I invite you to read the story of Inanna's descent and descent to and ascent from the underworld. Importantly, she goes to grieve with her sister Ereshkigal, goddess of the underworld, of the Kur. For her husband, Ereshkigal's husband, Gugalana, the bull of heaven, has died. And this likely, like so many death of the bull stories, or death of those worshiping the calf or bull stories, speaks to the transition from the age of Taurus to the age of Aries. It's another topic. You will see the horns like a bull on the head of Inanna here, and of many Anunnaki, or many god figures, if you will, from ancient traditions, especially in the Mesopotamian range. Like often you'll even see paintings of Moses with horns. This is a pun, it's a play on words, it's been said, because etymologically the word for horns is very similar to the word for shining. So the shining ones were often shown with horns. Who are the shining ones? Let's learn to be them. Certainly nothing shines brighter than Venus. Well, the moon last night, wow, I'm just remembering that Anna and I woke up at some point last night with the moon literally as bright as the sun. Sometime this morning, the moon as bright as the sun. It was the craziest experience I've actually had of the moon in many ways. So thank you for that memory. Okay. I love this image with Inanna's foot on the lion. Taming the lion, right? So we can say overcoming fear, but also overcoming these different powers that can claim us. Yeah. Venus as a morning star will quickly rise to a height over the course of the next couple of months, getting very far from the sun, not only in her retrograde travel, actually, okay, but when we shift from reverse to drive, you got to put it in park. Okay. And so the sun moves about 1 degree through the zodiac every day. Let's see where this goes next. Oh, let's stay here. The sun moves about 1 degree through the zodiac every day. So when Venus is moving 0, the distance between Venus and sun is increasing. Can you feel that? So after Venus shifts from reverse retrograde to drive direct, she's still moving at like 0 and has to accelerate. And until Venus matches the speed of the sun, and she will start moving faster than the sun from our point of view, but until Venus matches the speed of the sun, that distance between them, which we call a phase angle, is increasing. And this means Venus will literally get higher and higher in the morning sky every day. And then at some point, and this is called her maximum elongation, Venus will match the speed of the sun and start getting lower and lower and will slowly descend, very slowly. And then every month, the moon will come to signify these moon gates, these gates into the underworld where we are asked to release one of the sacred adornments. But today is the day we receive them. So it's a very important and powerful day. And if you miss this, the day I'm presenting it, it would have been more responsible, I guess, for me to record this some days ago. I did record a session with the Cosmic Intelligence Agency some days ago. Many of you, I hope, saw it. But this is something we can align ourselves to for the whole cycle. But today, if you're hearing this now, go to the sun. Open your heart to the sun. Know that Venus is there between you and the light. And set some intentions to receive her gifts. So in the beginning of the story, Inanna moves through a different underworld than her sister's realm, than the Kur. She goes to the Abzu, which is the home of Enki. And there, Enki, god of wisdom, gets drunk with Inanna, and in his drunken stupor, he gives to her all of the me, the crown of the steep. And I mean, just all of these amazing gifts. And every time she says, I take them, I think the better word would be, I receive them, right? So the next day she's sailing away and he wakes up hungover, like, hey, where's the me? He says to Ishmud. So, dude, you gave him to Inanna last night. So we have to get that stuff back. And so he sends these monsters. And for me, those monsters are the rising sun that takes Venus from our eyes. But every day she's further away and we get to see Venus for longer. And finally, when she, it said in the story, reaches the white quay, the docks of the city that she is meant to be queen for, Enki gives his blessings, keep the me, set up a royal queenship, be beloved, be a wonderful steward for this land, for these people, etc. So today is, for me, this Abzu. There are these two underworlds. The Abzu, that's in its short time, it's Venus traveling between Earth and the Sun, the retrograde Venus-Sun conjunction, which is today, June 3rd. And that is receiving these receiving these adornments, receiving these powers, receiving these gifts. And then later she will move and descend and have to remove 7 of these gifts as she descends into the Kur, and is literally, interestingly, goes to Ereshkigal to help her grieve. And yet Ereshkigal, in her pain, anger, it's hard to say, judges Inanna and kills her, slays her, hangs her on these meat hooks. It's a heavy story. But she is resuscitated. She's brought back to life. She is fed the plant and the water of life. And then she rises, returns to this world, climbing back from the underworld, passing through the 7 gates and taking back at the first gate her red robe, root chakra, see, her ring of power, or her rod and staff, some say. That's the sacral place, the girdle of birthstones, the 3rd chakra, the golden breastplate, the heart chakra, the lapis lazuli necklace, the throat chakra, the earrings, and I like to say bindi, the 3rd chakra, and then the crown. And she's fully stationed as the goddess on her throne in the West again. Well, that's not going to happen for some time. You know, I've been showing a lot of images from Washington, D.C. recently, and I think this is an especially tricky time to do so. And I don't want to say so much about that. I do hesitate, I think, to show these images because in some ways, I believe people can receive my sharing of this information as my glorification of ones that in that I don't stand behind in many ways. And I'm not going to get into that today. I don't want to state that as a disclaimer, but as an authentic sharing of who I am. But there are many symbols around the world. You know, I'm here to remind people to look up to the stars, but we also look up to these buildings that have been built by the builders. There's some very interesting symbols, and they're not all symbols of control, symbols of illumination. Anyway, this is from DC, and it's an amazing image, like so many there, of different expressions in statue of what would seem to be representations of the Virgin and the Child. But here, Mercury is the child, right? You see the winged cap. And this is Venus with the torch of illumination. And how do we know? And by the way, she's standing on the foundation of industry. Or maybe she's crushing that shit a bit. How do we know this is Venus? Well, look to her forehead. You see the 5-pointed star. Why a 5-pointed star? Because in 8 Earth years, which by the way are 13 Venus years, 13 trips for Venus about the sun, as Earth moves about the sun 8 times, creates 5 kisses between these planets, like today, Earth, Venus, Sun. We could call this an interior conjunction because Venus is interior between Earth and the Sun. Today in the sign of Gemini, in 19 months in the sign of Capricorn, 19 months after in Leo, then Aries, then Scorpio, then Gemini, then Capricorn, then Leo, then Aries, then Libra. See, Scorpio will become Libra as Aries will become Pisces in our lifetime, coming soon to a theater called You. Story for another time. But importantly, over the course of 8 Earth years, Earth, Venus, and the Sun make this type of interior alignment 5 times, drawing a pentacle in the sky through our zodiac. So the separation between these interior Venus conjunctions, like today's conjunction in Gemini, and last interior conjunction, which was October 26, 2018 in the sign of Scorpio, we can draw a line between the two that are separated by about 144 degrees, which is the distance between every other point of a pentacle. Importantly, we find this upside down pentagram on Venus's forehead here, and many have looked at this and said, oh, this is like satanic Illuminati business. Who am I to say? All I can tell you is what my heart knows, having learned this truth of that 5-pointed star and the way that Venus descends as a morning star, slowly descending, moving through these gates. This speaks to me of that. And Venus here is actually looking towards the southeast in this statue. And that's like a tale for another time. So I want to bring us into this totem. I gave a talk about Venus for the first time publicly on Friday the 13th in 2015 in Salem, Oregon. And I was invited to do a talk on Friday the 13th in Salem, Oregon. And Friday, I hope you know, is Venus's day. 13 has often been known as a number of the goddess. And one of these reasons we may say is that it is 13th Venus years for the 8 Earth years to create 5 of these kisses. If you've studied your sacred number, what the pentacle teaches us, like the golden number, you will find, like in the Fibonacci sequence, which brings us to this golden ratio, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 55, etc., that 5, 8, and 13 are very much alive. Now, 13 also with the goddess. Why? Because 13 months. There are more than 13 trips of the moon around the zodiac a year. Okay, if you're doing your months by new moon to new moon, it's not 13, by the way. Don't believe that hype. It's a much more dynamic and beautiful system then folks are trying to simplify this, as they say, like the patriarchy has taken the goddess number from us, aligned us to these 12 months. It's the solar reality. It's, you know, the burning of the goddess. It's wrong about the moon, but it's certainly not wrong that we have been through these burning times, that we are living in these burning times. And of course, this is not just about the feminine divine. Tune into the burnings that are happening today as I record on June 3rd, 2020, and the necessity for shift, the necessity for change. Yeah? And the mysteries have been burned at the stake. And all those who would try to preserve the ancient wisdom and the expressions, unfortunately, they have been written on stone and in stories that will persist, hidden in the web of the fairy tales even. How have you been burned? What in you is burned by racism, by sexism, by fascism in all of its states? How can we contribute to the shift in the world without? By also tuning to the necessities of the shift in the world within. And how can the pain of the world without mirror our inner pain, especially that which we have forgotten, because we have been taught that if we honor the one who sees at night, we are not fit for this life of reason. So I'll ask it this way: what is the treason of reason? How do we climb from the root of the burning time? So when I was asked to speak on Friday the 13th, Friday, Venus's day, Friday the 13th, especially Venus's day, and a day where we are meant to stay inside and make love. Or maybe we're meant to move outside and make love, and maybe making love doesn't always look like sensual touch, you know? And maybe the greatest way we can make love and offer our hearts is to do anything that feels for us, even if it's seen as out of bounds, to revolt, to resist, to contribute to the great shift. This is going to be a cycle, though, where we are asked to stop trying to figure it out and just to follow passion. And our passion has been burned. So I'm asked to speak on Friday the 13th in Salem, and I was like, let's speak about the burning times. Of course, Salem, Oregon, Salem, Massachusetts, though named for the same place, neither are that place. In the witch trials we know of Salem, Massachusetts, that inspired this talk, okay? So before I asked my friend Sienna Dawn, which is a wonderful thing because Venus, morning star, is the goddess of the dawn, is aurora, is oyster, is Easter, you see. And Sienna is an amazing, amazing artist in so many ways. And she compiled and created this totem, and much through images from Dark Beauty magazine. So thanks to them. And I sent Sienna like a paragraph of symbols I wanted to see in the description of what this was about, and how does the goddess, you know, reclaim the throne and rise in her grace in the face of those who would burn her at the stake. And so when I say her, yes, I am speaking about the feminine. Yes, I am speaking about women too, right? I mean, specifically. But I am also speaking to that one in me, that curvy one in me, that one in me who is not about the lines, but is about the travel, who is not about the destination, but is about the journey. That one in me who is not about the answer, but is about the question. That one in me who is not about the seeing, but is about the feeling. That one in me who also was burned as without me. Her representatives and bodies are burned every day. So how can I give my attention, my energy, my meta, my love, my support to that world without, from my place of privilege? born into? And how also can I not avoid the truth that there is that wound in me when I observe the disruption in this world that I live in, that I participate with? Yeah. And it's a fucking confusing thing. The rising, the birth of the phoenix, the rising of the warrior of resistance to retrieve grace, peace, Queen Bee, the harmony, the sacred way, the geometry. Put the crown back on the head. The crown of the dream. The crown of a more beautiful way. The crown that we all have the right to wear. The crown that we will wear as one. These goddesses specifically, surrounding the one of many moons, the maiden, the mother, the crone, the blood gates that a man truly cannot know physically, but can receive guidance from the feminine divine, and frankly, from his sisters on earth, into understanding more about life, about birth, about creating life, about death. This is the Leo goddess, one of the 5 star points now, the dancer. The Aries goddess, the warrior. The Scorpio goddess, the enchantress. And we're coming just now, we're transitioning today from a Scorpio cycle to a Gemini cycle. Then we'll move to a Capricorn cycle, reaching for the owl, the wisdom, the ancient, the elders. So much happening in Capricorn now. The realignment of the weavers. And yet there's also this Gemini goddess here, sitting on the moon, casting the spells, showing us that magic is not only, and it is this, it's not only the direction of our power, the activation of the authentic and raw heart and its art, but it is also the gift of mind, and that play through lightness, that divine lightness of being, even in the midst of turbulence, to find that playful imagination and to understand that spells are words, that thinks are things, that words, our narration literally is creating our reality. So learning in this cycle to bring the heart without shame or guilt, but realigning the way that we mind. You know, there's that interesting phrase that feels like such a limitation, a caging, mind yourself, right? It feels like an old language. It feels also like a, well, I'm just going to leave that there. I'll let you do what you do with that. But that's what I'm hearing, like, mind yourself. Remind yourself. And I'm not only speaking about remember, I am. Remember, put yourself back together, but remind yourself. Realign, reorganize. Rise, but first fall, first descend. So we're going to tune into this map. I'm going to say a little bit more about what it is, okay? Today is this Inanna receives the me, okay? Inanna moving through the absolute. For me, that is the earth side of the sun. And Venus retrograde is literally traveling between Earth and Sun, moving from the evening star side to the morning star side, disappearing for a short amount of time. It's typically about a week, but it can be anywhere from 2 days to 16 days, depending on the cycle and where you are looking from. The astronomical convention that we use is when Venus is within 10 degrees of the sun on either side, whether like is an evening star, which was here on May 28th, or morning star, which is here on June 9th. that is when she's unavailable to the human eye. This is a convention that is not true for every cycle and is not true from every place, but it's a convention that we use to speak globally. Regardless, this is definitely the time, and I think it's 10:47 a.m. Pacific today, June 3rd, when Venus aligns between Earth and the Sun. And for me, this is Inanna receiving the me. So just being open to this, not trying to attempt to tell the mystery what it is, but listen, to pray with your ears, not your mouth, and to just not have expectations, but to know that you are being fertilized with nutrients that will guide this cycle's sprouting, flowering, fruiting, composting into the next. So Venus receives the me, this interior conjunction, Earth, Venus, Sun. A new cycle begins, and in the sign of Gemini, a Gemini cycle, but I say a Gemini-Aries cycle, why? So Venus reaches her maximum brightness in July. She's not furthest from the sun until August, okay? And that's when she visibly will be seen sinking in the sky. But as soon as Venus stations direct, and this happens at the royal star Aldebaran. Oh, sorry, that's maximum brightness. But Venus stationed direct very close. Aldebaran's about 10 Gemini. So as soon as she stations direct, and this is June 24th, she's now moving direct through the zodiac, and in that regard starting to chase the sun. Now she's not doing a good job at first because the sun's still moving faster until Venus's maximum elongation. That's when her speed equals that of the sun, and so every day after you'll see this phase angle declining. Venus can only get 48 degrees from the sun in this cycle. The furthest she will get away is less than 46. Why only that far from the sun? Because she's between Earth and Sun. So in a sense, we just see Venus doing this. If I'm the light and you're the Earth. And I'm learning to be the light, and you are too. And this cycle wants us to learn in our heart a lightness of being. Play, truth, youth. Now, how can we be playful and young when the truth is our world is effed? And things need to change. Well, good, because Gemini is the winds of change that come to blow and rearrange and realign. And it's often confusing and trickster. But it's a shift that is necessary, a shift that we should be calling in and releasing ourselves to wherever we will be taken. Just writing to a student really quickly. Okay, so after Venus stations direct, and this is the system that came through Daniel Jamario. I think it was inspired in many ways by a great book called Star Trek to Hawaii by Clyde Hostetler, who is certainly not an astrologer. In fact, there's a one-liner in the text where, as an astronomer, is, the right thing to do to deny astrology altogether. See the rationalist mind. But he's speaking about the Venus cycle, right? So the heart needs to speak regardless. And he does an amazing job kind of tying the story of Inanna's descent through the 7 gates to these Moon-Venus conjunctions as she's descending as a morning star. Because that's what happens. As soon as Venus reaches maximum elongation, she's getting closer and closer to the sun. And every month now, the moon will come conjoin Venus about once a month, as you can see, and they're color-coded to the chakras. Why? The sky has chakras, and these are these places. The moon will conjoin Venus in the purple place in August, and in the blue place in September. It's like that, you see. And the technology, and this is dreamed forth by Daniel Jamario at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, certainly created with and fortified by and imagined anew by Kaylin Castell of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. Kaylin and Tammy Brunk have an amazing world called Venus Alchemy. You can find them at venusalchemy.com, where they are guiding seekers and souls through this path of purification and realignment. I cannot highly recommend working with them. And so they will be beginning a cycle today. Although I should say that shamanic astrology is tuned to the cycle beginning when Venus first becomes visible, and utilizing this convention of 10 degree separation. And so that day is June 9th. So I'll certainly be going somewhere where I can attempt to see Venus in these days ahead and celebrate visibly this rebirth. And again, trying to go with more ears than mouths, trying not to tell Venus what she's here to do in a Gemini cycle and like listen, right? Okay. So every month the moon conjoins Venus. In shamanic astrology, the system begins when Venus stations direct, and every moon Venus conjunction thereafter is sending us through an opportunity to purify these energetic centers. I'll speak a little bit more about that at the end. Then we move through a time where Venus literally astronomically is moving behind the sun. She gets so close to the light that we go dark with Venus. We cannot see her. There's no telescope on Earth that could possibly see through the sun, right? Love deserves a break too. It can be anywhere from 60 to 100 days. If we use this convention of 10 degrees on either side of the sun, Venus will disappear as a morning star into the underworld on February 13th, 2021, and then reappear now as an evening star May 3rd, 2021, in between having her exterior conjunction, not like today, Earth, Venus, Sun. At that time, Earth, Sun, Venus. Not Venus closest to Earth as possible. That's today. Venus is far away. And being reborn, who knows what's going on there? But in the story, she's killed and later resuscitated. And then she climbs back, okay? So while in the morning star experience, Venus quickly, because she's retrograde from our experience, she quickly separates from the sun. You can see that here. She quickly rises to her morning star height, and then she slowly descends month by month. The opposite is true in the evening star. She shows up and then she sets. And the next day she's a little further from the sun. She shows up and then she sets. But she slowly separates from the sun. Every month, the moon, now the waxing crescent moon, comes to join her in the sunset west. And this brings us into the time of reclaiming the power of these energetic centers and experiences. Taking back the root, taking back the sacral. I'll speak a little bit about that here at the end. But in so much, this is about how you come to these things and how you make yourself available for them to come to you, for this to guide you, the body intelligence. To release the mind, to be reminded of how we can remind. Okay. So this is the chart of the Cazimi today. Oh, I was saying 1047. It's 1043:37. I'm tempted to get all numerological, but why don't I release that need of the mind to play and know while also honoring it and letting it thrive? That's the challenge of this cycle, this Gemini cycle. I will say in many ways, it's about the head and the heart. And the night and the day. Yeah, and the conscious and the superconscious and the awakening and the dreaming and all of these things. And I think awakening is a really important study and intention. I like to say a weirdening, some of you probably know. I think it's important that we see and honor this square from the Venus conjunction with Sun. Mars, it's very strong, and Mars we will find in the next conjunction of this cycle is right here where Venus meets the Sun today, only because he spends plenty of time in Aries coming up, for he will have a retrograde, which for Mars happens only about every 2 years. So Mars and Sun have their own cycle, right? All these planets have these synodic cycles, synod meaning meeting, and so today Venus meets the Sun, Earth, Venus, Sun. Quincunx to the Scorpio moon. And this in Scorpio is where Venus began her last quest. Now it was in very early degrees of Scorpio, and some, like the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, actually look at this last cycle that we are transitioning from into Gemini as a Libra cycle, as the first Libra cycle of our lifetime. That's a long story for another time. I saw Venus when she was in Scorpio. Yeah, it's a long story for another time. Anyway, in the way that I've come to do this work, trained in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, and also, you know, assimilating, shifting, whatever. In my experience, this last cycle was about this kind of transitional cycle, and there'll be another one in 8 years of Scorpio Libra energy. And as I will show you, I've really come to reframe the way that I do these cycles based on the archetypal intention of the interior conjunction. Like, so today we begin a Gemini cycle, and that needs to be initiated through the exterior conjunction. So this is Earth, Sun, Venus, and this is in the sign of Aries. These images, by the way, also from DC. So notice that, as I said before, Mars, and look at the North Node in the same degree of Gemini where Venus meets Sun today. And at that time, this Gemini Mars node square Mercury in Pisces, trining Saturn in Aquarius. And I can't get into the chart too much. Interestingly, this quincunx now of Virgo and Aries, and part of that, I'm going to rewind to this Gemini chart. Part of that is about independence. But see, independence is not isolation. I mean, that is the greatest challenge of our time. And I will say that what this whole thing that we're in the midst of, this alchemical calcination, is about, like, we haven't even seen it yet. We're starting to see it more. There are some strange things coming our way, and allowing ourselves to be strange and releasing our grip on what we want reality to be and what we were taught it was is going to be necessary for us to realign our faith. Is the fuel that will see us through. We are meant to question faith versus belief, knowing versus believing, seeing versus dreaming. There's a lot of head versus the heart stuff here, and the need to know versus honoring our feelings and trusting that. Of course, one of the most challenging things for the human experience, maybe always, certainly now, we see this Mercury in Cancer, square Chiron in Aries too, healing self for the consciousness of compassionate love for family, for tribe. Something I'll be exploring much more as I'm a guide for Astrology Hub's Inner Circle coming up. The idea of shelter and what is that? And I found etymologically, it's likely rooted to this word sheldron, which is the shield wall, right? That we all get together and put our shields up so the arrows can't hit us. But for us to do that, we have to all get together, which means you cannot shelter in place alone. First of all, a shelter is a place, but it's a place, it's an energetic place of support, of love. So much of this cycle will be tuned to that. I'm saying more than I should just for the sake of time, not only for I don't have the time, but for our attention here. Astrologers explore this chart deeply. This is the conception of a 19-month cycle. And the way that I've come to work with it is that this is a Gemini-Aries cycle. And so the Gemini intentions, and some of that is the need to know and explore and wonder and to be young and free in that, okay? But the challenge is, how can we find freedom if we try to see our way through this craziness, right? How do we find the answer? I mean, the heart says just passionately follow this thing and we will find our way through. The faith says trust. The mind wants to know, wants to figure it out, wants to plan. And it's not an evil force, you know? It's not an inhumane or unhuman force, but it's a very different kind of force. And I think we are going to be challenged by the need to know. If we do that with the mind alone, now solve et coagula, break apart and put back together, let the mind be the mind, let the heart be the heart. But this cycle, it is about bringing that kind of Venusian and Mercurial together. And it's the master cycle of the Venus star because it is Gemini that hosts her north node. And it is Gemini where in our lifetimes we experience the Venus transits, which happened in Gemini in this star point 2004 and 2012. Those are done. We won't have Venus. I won't have a Venus transit in my lifetime again. But this Gemini cycle, it is the cycle. There's something about the imagination goddess. There is something about the winds that change. There is something about a trickster shift in the way that we experience and explore and create reality. And we will be tested in our faith, in our beliefs, right? What do you believe reality is? This is going to be a cycle that wants us to release our grip on the world as we think it is so we can move through the strange symbolic realms and the waves and the waters of disillusion, and then separate, which is an Aries and a Martian function, I should say, not Aries, fire function, separate from what is me and what is not me. What is the world and what is not the world? I was told this was it. Is it? Do we want it to be? This is it. Yeah. And this is a heavy word to use, especially right now, because we've been trained to like excuse this word from the table and lean towards the word discernment, which is a wonderful word of the heart, discernment, right? If this feels bad, this study, like don't go there, right? That doesn't mean put your head in the sand and avoid what's going on because it's too confusing or too scary. No, but trust your heart and let your heart move you through places and honor what is authentic and what is worth your energy and your attention. The word that we've been asked to excuse, because today we've been told it equals sexism, it equals racism, is discrimination. And that is a word of the power of the mind. And it is about separation. So for me to say, this is a world that I'm willing to live in, and this is the ways of this world that I am not. And whatever I have to sacrifice to release a world like this, yeah? But also very importantly, the chosen filters. Because the Gemini energy says this. I mean, Gemini Venus is a very flirtatious energy. And I don't want to do your thing, but the one that wants to be here, there, everywhere, sometimes is the one that is unwilling to be there, with this one. Developing the depth, all of the pain, Not saying that too well, but hopefully you're hearing it better than I can. This Gemini-Aries cycle, the initiations will happen in Aries. And so part of this looks like this, okay? There are a gazillion things you can do. And in some dimension, you're doing it all, okay? But here, what will it be? Because I hope that the heart will guide you into a new fascination for your exploration, for your study, for your weirding, for your awakening, for shift, for change. But there's a gazillion ways you can do that, what it will be. And so this Aries exterior conjunction, this Gemini-Aries cycle, as I will call it, it asks that. It says, okay, go into these many, many places, but also choose. You can't do it all. So I'm contradicting myself on one level saying like, don't strategize, let the heart, let the passion be the guide. And on another level, I'm saying, look, don't try to figure it out, but also choose, let me say it in this way. While it might be a distraction for you to try to find the only way through, when you see 17, you're going to have to pick one, or at least only a few. I do have a Gemini mantra personally, which is these many branches I'm called to climb all emanate from the same trunk. But there is something about separating from and choosing the path and choosing where my sacred work is. Like, what is the mountain I will climb? Who am I in this thing of us? Who am I in this thing of we are one? Gemini, Gemini why, Gemini how, Gemini who, Gemini hi, Gemini how do you do? Okay. So a few things. The maps show that today's Venus-Sun conjunction is directly above Quintana Roo, like Yucatan zone, very close to Chichen Itza. This is the Quetzalcoatl, the Kukulkan, that's the Maya word for Quetzalcoatl, which is Mexica, right? So Venus, likely evening star. Some say morning star, and there's some debate. Speaking of Mexico, this is from the murals at Teotihuacan, right? At Tlaloc, like water god. And here we see that 5-pointed star. This was an image of Venus, often said as the evening star, the cool evening side that brings us into the rest versus like the burning. And I just want to honor that this place brings us wisdom. I'm going to skip through where the other Venus sun lines are seen on the earth today, although it is a very interesting thing. Where this wisdom reminds us, and there was a transmission of this in Greece as well. Like Venus isn't all love and beauty and ease. Venus morning star was war. I mean, it's said that the Maya expressed this as that in this retrograde. They didn't say it that way, but she's reborn in the morning as this furious, fiery one, like covered in the blood of war. Of course, I'm paraphrasing from things that have been whispered and handed down to me. I'm not speaking of a translation of one of the 4 codices that was not burned. And I want to honor that arises again. This gentricide, this gender side, this racial side, this religious side, and a conformity quest by empire, asking you to pretend there's equality by staying small and asleep. I will say one thing about this Gemini-Aries cycle, right? So Gemini-Aries cycle, that's how I've come to call it. That's not my training, I should say that. It is about awakening, is about awakening. It is about releasing your belief in what you believe the world to be so you can see what it truly is. It is about purification of perception in that regard. And most importantly, not just what we perceive, but what we perceive is what we create. Reminding, realigning. And in this awakening, it's very important to understand that as a voice of truth, who are you speaking with? Because your truth might actually put them further to sleep. And so there's this stage we come to when we see this world for what it is, or begin to, and we begin to understand it's not what we were programmed to think it was. It is a very difficult and turbulent dark night of the soul to release this need for the shelter of an authority figure that we thought was here for us and is not. Then we want to wake everybody up. We want to run around shaking people, which can be like an Aries, awakening impetus. But look, that is not the way. It is the dreamer who is receiving the vision that will set us free. So warrior, awaken yourself and keep the fire warm so the dreamer can sleep. And awaken at their own pace with that vision intact. You are the awakening one and you are the dreamer. How can you be both in a world that needs you now? This is the challenge, and it is meant to weigh on the heart, and it will hurt more if you try to figure it out. Most importantly to me, that's what this cycle is about. And this is the time, beginning today. And in the next couple of months, Venus will rise quickly to claim her throne and then slowly descend, because we understand that perhaps death is a necessity for our rebirth. And I think probably not. But composting the old for rich soil to plant the new seeds. transmuting the lead, not purging it and releasing it, transmuting it into the gold. I did not make this slide. I don't feel, for example, that the sacral chakra is all about pleasure. I personally prefer creation, creativity, like literally creating life, but much more. But I think it's a great example of ways that we are asked to play. With Venus descending as a morning star, and that's the 9 months ahead, friends. Like, we are pregnant with a new us, but not one by reclaiming our powers. Wait for that. That's Venus as an evening star. We'll look at those dates. As a morning star release, and we have about a month to go through these sacred gates. So how do I release that which contaminates? The seventh, how that keeps me from connecting to the divine. What is it? It's oftentimes belief systems, or maybe that's more of a third eye thing. What keeps me from speaking truth? So say blocked by lies, okay. But that's not just the lies I tell, it's the lies I've chosen to believe in because it makes life easier. Illusion, third eye, lies. It's not the only thing that blocks us from hearing and speaking truth. And we should also learn to filter the way we do speak truth so that it will be more effective. That's a lot about what this cycle is about, and it will be taught by the heart. Okay, so we release fear, and then on the way back up, we reclaim, I wouldn't say survival, I would say groundedness. So maybe I should create a slide instead of showing one that I don't particularly agree with, but let me show that again. That's important. And what's most important is how you do this. And also this cycle will be a cycle, if you choose to tune in, that will teach you about this. So these are the dates on the way down. This is when we tune in, July 16th until August 15th, purging the clutter from the crown chakra. What keeps me from connecting to divinity? What keeps me August 15th to September 13th from seeing clearly, from knowing clearly? August 15th to September 13th, that September 13th to October 13th, what keeps me from hearing, speaking truth? What keeps me from love, you know? All right, so you get the point. Not happy with this yellow. Speaking of my Venus in Virgo, I guess. Anyway, so we go through a death and rebirth. Good. And now, month at a time, symbolized by the Moon-Venus conjunctions in the evening star sky. These, by the way, symbolized by the Moon-Venus conjunctions in the morning side. As she descends through the sky chakra, the moon meets her every month, bringing her down, the old moon and the young Venus, and then the young moon and the old Venus, in a sense. I shouldn't say old Venus, ever. Never ask a lady how old she is. And why do I say her with Venus? Of course, Venus is beyond gender, so I'm sorry if that offends. I really am. But for me, at least in my kind of low level of connecting with these planetary energies, it's important for me now, and actually I see a time where I will shift away, but I need to personify. I need to cast upon some kind of experience of a planetary energy, like as a person, so I can choose to relate with them like directly and reverently. But you know, as a being, it's the way that many have done it over time, and that, like, I don't know, I'd say I've been conditioned to, but for purpose. And I think there's a day maybe where I transcend that. Maybe that's what this cycle is about for me. I don't know. I want to actually choose some things that I can align my intentions to in reclaiming, like mind, truth, communication, shift, change, re-youthing. This is Gemini energies. And what in that regard are worth fighting for? The Aries energy, worth protecting, worth pioneering. But at the same time, if I go to the sky with an earth and say all these things about how it's going to be, I am completely removing myself from what they can be, because I'm marrying myself to expectation, and expectation is the enemy of surprise, and surprise is the portal to experience, and experience, friends, feeling, healing, knowing is the gift of growing that we give to the growth of the one and only thing. So here's the timeline. Do it. It's so powerful. And again, I cannot more highly recommend venusalchemy.com, working with Kaylin Castell and Tammy Brunk through these stages. They do it a little differently than me. If you want to just tune into where you were born, into which cycle were you born, how are you an usher for the global guidance? What, where in the chakra gates were you born? Are you born in a place where you're meant to be purging the third eye? That's me, right? Or are you in a place where you're meant to be reclaiming the sacral chakra? Okay, and for who? Call me. So GeminiBrett.com is where you can find me. Let's do a little deal. Usually a 90-minute session, which you can see as a follow-up session, is on my site is 150. Use the contact button at GeminiBrett.com and we'll do a Venus specific session, like 90 minutes for $123 to honor the great Fibonacci sequence. So you heard it here. The password will be Salem, SALEM. So just reach out to me, contact me through GeminiBrett.com or at Facebook, where I'm Brett Joseph, or Gemini Brett Astrology at Facebook, whatever. Reach out to me. Password is Salem. If you're watching this, you know that, SALEM, and we can tune into how does this particular cycle work with you, and what was the particular cycle into which you were born. Now, we are all the cycles, we are all of the seasons. So aligning to this and seeing where this conjunction at 14, 13 and a half Gemini is in your houses. For me, first house. So I was born into a Leo cycle, or a Virgo Leo cycle, but this one wants to remind me to realign me. How will it work for you? All right, friends. Well, thanks for tuning in. Love and planets to you. Sorry to my student with whom I'm now 23 minutes late. That's a good number. And I think he's been watching here anyway. So what's up? Let's do this other thing, friend. If you're interested in learning as an astrologer, if you're interested in adding this tool, that's also something that we can do, right? I do mentorship. I would love to transmit this synodic, this cyclical awareness and information to you. We start with the moon. We bring it to actually sun, star, sun, outer planet, a little bit easier. And then we come to the interior decorators, Venus, and then Mercury, the trickster himself. So let's honor that truth of that mercurial essence of twin Gemini reality, and honor that Inanna and Ninshabar, Venus and Mercury danced together in the Gemini sunset west before this thing would begin. And understand that perhaps the greatest way that we can remind, that we can realign thought and therefore experience, is by allowing the heart to whisper its mysteries from the other side. I'll see you there. Love and planets, friends.